The year is 2018. Mercedes have won the last 4 consecutive Constructor and Drivers' World Championships, with Hamilton, Brittany and Bottas helping, and really since 2014 Mercedes have not had any proper competition. 2014 Red Bull 296 points off Mercedes, 2015 Ferrari 275 points off Mercedes, 2016 Red Bull 297 points off Mercedes, and the last season in 2017 was Ferrari as their closest rivals with 146 points difference, which yes was a lot closer. So people expected big things in 2018, and wow, coming into the 2018 first half of the season, 21 rounds in the 2018 season, in Silverstone, of all places for it to happen, Vettel was leading the championship with 171 points to Lewis Hamilton's 163. Which then also meant that Ferrari were winning the Constructors' Championship with the help of Kimi Raikkonen on 287 points, to the pair of Hamilton and Bottas in the Mercedes only on 267. So, still anyone's game, but definitely advantage Ferrari. And this is where it all comes to play. Coming into the second half of the season, you need that advantage going in to set the record straight. Have to get everything right at Sebastian Vettel's home Grand Prix. This is the Hockenheim 2018 Grand Prix. So into Q1, and the Ferrari set the pace quite drastically, being half a tenth above the rest of the field, and more importantly for them, Hamilton could only manage P5. Now, this wasn't a great showing for him, and he hadn't looked pretty good in practice sessions beforehand as well. However, the big issue was he then had hydraulics issue, meaning that yes, he got out of Q1, but it meant that he had to park up his car by the side of the road and could not partake in qualifying any longer. This full-heartedly meant that Ferrari had to capitalise on these potential points over Mercedes. Oh, and also, in P20, you'll see Stoffel Van Dorn. Thank God I don't have to watch that anymore. I'm sorry, Williams fans. Hopefully your day will come. But, whew, 2017, 2018 was not a fun time to be a McLaren. 2013 to God knows when wasn't a good time, but I got off on a tangent. So then going into Q2, of course, both Ferraris secure the top 10 positions quite easily. However, this time round, Bottas decided to show exactly what the Mercedes could offer, with a very fierce and young Max Verstappen following in tow, meaning the Ferraris weren't going to have an easy time of it. They still had to focus on the remaining Mercedes and the remaining Red Bull, as both their teammates did not set times in Q2, which meant that Ricciardo started P15 and Hamilton in P14. Oh, and if things stayed the same as they were in qualifying, Vettel would have gone into the second half of the season with a gap of 33 points to Lewis Hamilton in second place. Let the race begin. 5 red lights and away they went, with Vettel getting a good enough start to fend off Bottas, and further down the grid, Grosjean went slightly wide through turn 1, letting both the Renaults have a sniff up the inside, with Verstappen also desperately trying to get past Raikkonen the whole of the first lap for that third place. However, more importantly, Hamilton was really struggling to get past Sirotkin and only managed to do it in sector 3, eventually moving up to P13. Could have dropped down, so it wasn't a worse start, but again, Hamilton needed to get a groove on if he wanted to get some points today. After quite a tussly lap 1, as per usual in a lot of races in F1, it quite drastically calmed down, and nothing of importance happened until lap 26, which is when the first of the leaders, which was basically Ferrari, Bottas and Verstappen, decided to pit with Sebastian Vettel. And then very unfortunately, only a matter of seconds later, completely out of the blue, Ricciardo's power unit gave up on him and meant that he DNF'd out of the race. So Ricciardo's comeback was not happening. And oh, by the way, in 2018, this was the season he decided to leave Red Bull because he did have 8 DNFs that season with a lot of mechanical issues and also the infamous Baku crash with Verstappen. As we all know though, however, that was really a turning point in his career and what would lead to his downfall. You had Bottas pitting, you had Verstappen pitting, you had Raikkonen pitting as well. However, very importantly, you did not have Lewis Hamilton pitting, and he was being able to keep up with the rest of the field. By the time it came to lap 33, which was the first signs we saw of any rain coming down onto the track, Hamilton still had not pitted and was in P3. only a matter of seconds behind the Ferraris. Now, yes, he did have to make a pit stop, so for Mercedes, they were hoping that the rain would come, Hamilton would be able to switch on to the intermediates or the wets and carry on through the race like that. However, again, from lap 33 to lap 42, the status quo stayed pretty much the same, bar Raikkonen being told to give his position to Vettel for the Drivers' World Championship. However, Hamilton eventually had to pit, and it almost looked like it was the worst timing possible, as come lap 42, this is where we started to see a lot of rain, especially in the second sector. However, like a lot of the times in F1, the rain was quite localized. So you'd have a dry sector 1, half a dry sector 3, and a wet sector 2. So no one really knew what tyres to be on. However, with Lewis Hamilton on the fresh set of tyres compared to everyone's old tyres, even the freshest set of dry tyres on a wet track will be quicker than the leaders. And while this was all happening, a lot was going on in the field. By lap 44, a lot of the rain was causing a bit of trouble. Leclerc chasing Alonso, spun out, just about saving his car. Gasly in a Toro Rosso got put onto the full wets with a lot of confusion over at Toro Rosso. However, what Gasly did not know is that they were actually doing him a favour, as they were just giving him practice on how to perform in that 2024 first half of the season Alpine. A whopping 6 years before that would happen, they must have had a fortune teller over at Toro Rosso. But even with all of this going on around the track, all of the front runners, which was the Ferraris and both Mercedes, did not want to pit. And come lap 51, you could see just how bad the rain was, especially in sector 2. By this point, Hamilton was right back into the field, so Ferrari had to be very careful with what strategy they played. Who would strike first, the Mercedes or the Ferrari? Well, they didn't have to choose.
Stay ahead, and now Kevin Magnussen under pressure as Raikkonen goes round the outside of him, and Raikkonen goes off the track, and there's a force injury of Sergio Perez spinning off the track as well and kicking up a whole load of dirt as he lights up his tyres in a bid to get back on the racetrack, and Bottas is ahead of Kimi Raikkonen. Fires it out of the race, Sebastian Vettel. He has been leading almost from start to finish, but now he's out of this race.
Sake. Sorry, guys.
And just like that, Sebastian Vettel was out of his home Grand Prix whilst leading. After that, a safety car instantly got called out. You had Valtteri Bottas going into the pits. You had Kimi Raikkonen going to the pits. You almost had Lewis Hamilton going to the pits, but then he just about got away with it and swerved out of the pit entry. It would have been a nightmare for Mercedes if he had gone into those pits. Because Bottas, when he had gone in earlier, they didn't have the tyres ready for him, so Mercedes were all over the place. But comes to the end of these pit stops, and when the safety car was bringing them around, it was very much clear that the track was once again drying, which now meant, for the first time in a race, you had Lewis Hamilton in a net first place, with Bottas, Raikkonen and Verstappen behind him. However, all of these drivers were on fresher, dry tyres. Hamilton, on his older dry tyres, had to be extremely careful, and Bottas had other ideas of who was going to win the race, as when the safety car got called in, Bottas immediately went to overtake Lewis Hamilton. It got very scary for the Mercedes duo. However, Bottas got told to back off, help protect Lewis Hamilton's win, as Lewis Hamilton needed it for the Drivers' World Championship. It's an understandable move from Mercedes, a tough decision that had to be made, and it's one of those radio messages we got used to hearing quite a lot.
Valtteri, it's James. Please hold position. I'm sorry.
Copy, James.
But through all of this drama throughout the race, somehow, miraculously, Lewis Hamilton managed to come from P14 to first place, with Valtteri Bottas in second and Kimi Raikkonen in third. What a brilliant race, and what a brilliant weekend for Mercedes. Coming into it with their drivers 2nd and 14th, it looked like a disaster class at their home Grand Prix. Little did they know that it would actually become a disaster class at Sebastian Vettel's home Grand Prix. A lot of people's home Grand Prix in Germany. However, after this weekend had been completed, it then meant going into round 11, officially into the second half of the 2018 season, Lewis Hamilton now led the Drivers' World Championship. And Mercedes overtook Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship as well. So in just one weekend alone, Ferrari went from top dog, and now Mercedes had taken their spots. It's a cruel world in F1, and as we know, this race would become such a pivotal point in the 2018 season. as it gave Mercedes the momentum going into the second half of the season, meaning that Lewis Hamilton then went on to win 7 of the next 10 Grand Prix in the season, completely sailing away with the Drivers' World Championship and Mercedes taking that Constructors. And it's a shame, because that would be Vettel's last championship contending season in 2018. However, that Ferrari could just not go the whole season, and when it mattered, they crumbled. You can't be too sad, as Sebastian Vettel is not much of a what if, as he still had a brilliant career, winning 4 Drivers' World Championships and retiring in 2022 with Aston Martin. I think the bigger what if definitely still is Fernando Alonso and Ferrari, rather than Vettel than Ferrari. But what does that mean we have learnt from today's video? Well, never trust a Ferrari driver at their home Grand Prix. Well, most of the time. Sometimes, I think in the world of F1, we forget just how close some teams got to Mercedes in that 2010 era, because it does really seem like they completely rinsed the floor with everyone, and in most seasons they did, but in 2017 and 2018, Ferrari were pretty close. But most importantly, the thing we have to take away from this video is remembering that Marcus Ericsson and Brendan Hartley scored points in F1 at the Hockenheim Grand Prix. The GOATs. Thank you for watching.